It's a cold and it's a broken hallelujah. Amidst such unfathomable violence and hatred in our world, we can turn to creative expression. We can turn to the outlet of music, of movement, of spoken word as a healing process to express and to allow us to begin to process and integrate what seems so unbearable. Music can move us to places that are beyond words and allow us to express what we feel so deeply. It's that sense of connection with ourselves, with each other, that connection with something greater. So in times such as these, this collective uncertainty, anger, sadness, disbelief, frustration, despair, heartbreak, and fear, we could easily get lost in our emotions. Or we could, on the other end, try to avoid or suppress them at all cost. This month, we have been discussing the topic of emotions and why it's important for us to look deeper into the nuance of a range of emotions in order to understand what we are feeling and to provide space to witness and be present with our emotions and allow ourselves to feel our feelings all the way through. We tend to label negative those things those emotions we're not comfortable with, right? And we tend to label good those emotions that are more comfortable. And as a culture, and particularly in American, or more specifically in the white USian culture, we have a very little skill set on knowing how to express and be with our anger and our sadness. How to feel these intense emotions and express them appropriately. Our cultural rituals and celebrations focus more on the joyous occasions, the new beginnings of New Year's, of 4th of July, birthdays. And we don't have many rituals such as the Mexican holiday of Day of the Dead to honor our ancestors. We don't, as a culture, as much embrace the impermanence of life as taught by the Tibetan Buddhist with the sand mandalas. And we often deny ourselves the right to grieve by jumping to positive sentiments like memories will bring comfort and love lives on in our heart. And I am as much of a product of this culture as any, raised in the positivity of the 80s and 90s. Yet it is through my own maturing into my ministry that I have been called into a deeper willingness to sit with pain, to acknowledge my own grief and sadness and sorrow and fear and anger, in order to be that space to sit with others, to not judge it, to not try to hurry it along, but to simply be with it. Because life is filled with a range of emotions, from joy to anger, fear. And today, we are looking at sadness and grief, and that particularly nuanced emotion of bittersweet. So let's dive in. Actually, let's ease in. Let's just ease into the flow, recognizing that in all things there is this ebb and flow, a waxing and a waning. So I'd like to share first this story from the book Bittersweet by Susan Cain. She tells a story of her friend Susan David, who is a Harvard Medical School psychologist. Susan was just 15 when her 42-year-old father was diagnosed with colon cancer. Everyone told her just to stay positive and everything will be okay. So even as the illness ravaged her father's body, even as it turned out to be not so much okay, Susan kept acting as it was. She watched stoically as her father grew weaker and weaker until one Friday morning in May, before she left for school, her mother whispered that she should come and say goodbye. Susan put down her backpack and she walked down the hall to her father's deathbed. She was sure he could still hear her, and she told him how much she loved him and always would. And then she picked up her backpack and went to school. Math class, history, biology. She took notes, she chatted with her classmates, she ate lunch. And when she got home, he was gone. The family was devastated, not only emotionally, but also financially. See, during his brief illness, her father, normally a very prudent and philosophical man, had gotten the idea that if he just stayed positive and had faith in God, that he would be cured. And, as advised by some of the clergy that visited him, he wasn't being positive enough, and he showed a lack of faith. And so, in order to prove his faith, he canceled his life insurance policy. He'd been paying on that policy all his adult life, and when he died, 20 weeks later, the family faced a mountain of debt. But in the months that followed, Susan walked smiling through the world as everyone she knew wanted. She showed up as that upbeat. Susan was strong, positive, and above all, Susan was okay. Sometimes teachers and friends would ask how she was doing, and she always said, okay. She was constitutionally cheerful, and she was a master of being okay. No one asked, how are you really? And Susan didn't tell them. She didn't even tell herself. Only through food did she begin to express her grief, and she binged and purged and binged again. And she might have continued in this way indefinitely if it was not for her 8th grade English teacher, the one who handed her a blank notebook. And as it happened, this teacher too had lost a parent at a young age. The teacher told her, write. Tell the truth of your life. Write as if no one's reading. Susan understood the assignment, and just like that, she recalls now, I was invited to show up authentically to my grief and pain. And she wrote every day the enormity of her loss, the agony of it. She gave these journal entries to her teacher, who then wrote back, but in light pencil, as if to say, I hear you, but this is your story. Her teacher didn't deny Susan's feelings, nor did she encourage them. She simply witnessed them. But for Susan, these little love letters, what Susan called them, love letters, were nothing short of a revolution in a blank notebook, a revolution that saved her psyche, made her strong and resilient and joyful, and shaped her life's work. So I share this story with you, someone else's story that I read, because it's easier than telling you my own. Yet the truth is, her story resonates deeply with me. When my dad was dying of cancer about 18 years ago, being the good, positive, religious scientist family that we were, we didn't talk much of the reality of the situation. We stayed positive. Yet, my journal, too, became my refuge. That place where I could admit my fears, admit my sadness, admit the unsurmountable grief that I was afraid to even approach, for I might fall into a puddle and never get up. Yet, I maintained my cheerful, positive facade and was able to convince everyone that I was okay. I jumped right into the doing and the creating, and I had much fuel for that, yet I skipped over the place of sitting as much with the pain. We have all these kind of myths about grief, and one of them I had heard at some point was this idea that grief has a timeline, right? That it's about a year that you grieve. So I think somewhere in my mind I thought, well, if I could get through this year. So I got through the year and I poured myself into my work. I was a young adult in Chicago and I started a theater company. I started the youth program. I was taking classes, running full steam ahead with my life. And then the year came, and that's when it really came crashing in, because it wasn't gone. It was there all along, and it needed a voice. Yet I could convince anyone that I was okay. Shortly after he died, I had one session with a grief counselor, and I convinced her that I was all good, I had a healthy support system, and I only needed the one session, fooling, of course, her and me. Yet I still remember this one thing she said, this idea that the intensity of my grief and sadness is a reflection of the intensity, the immense love that I have for my father. And see, in that moment, it really kind of struck me, because I still was living in this dichotomy that love is good and that sadness was bad. So this idea of putting the two together was new to me. Which leads me to this emotion of bittersweet. Bittersweet. It's that feeling at graduations. I feel like it's so palpable this month of May, right? Transition time. So graduations, moving. It's that feeling of when we retire, or when a loved one who has suffered dies. It's the ability to hold both the joy and the happiness and the sadness as they move quickly, bouncing between the two emotions. There's an Arabic expression, days of honey, days of onions. This speaks to that ups and downs, right? The ups and downs we feel not only throughout a day, but almost within moments. We can feel the sadness, the sorrow, the heartbreak, and the love. And to begin to acknowledge and accept that this is as much a part of life as is the joy and the peace and the celebration, because it is part of our shared humanity. We recognize the full spectrum of our emotions, and it reminds us that we are human. And It helps us to transcend personal and collective pain by remembering that we are all in this together. A reminder above all else to be kind to one another. As the expression goes, you never know what is going on for someone. They may show up with a smile and say everything's okay, but maybe they just haven't been asked, how are you really? Expressing our emotions is very vulnerable, and it's countercultural. We don't have many places and spaces in which we are able to be with each other in this way. Yet just as we sleep, we eat, we go to the bathroom, we all feel. It's part of being human. So instead of judging ourselves for our feelings, what if we were to lean into love and allow that love to transform our pain, to bring it through, to feel it through, and allow it to transform it into something healing or creative, an expression that can then touch someone else and have them remember that they are not alone. We get to make the difference in the lives of others when we show our vulnerability, because we see ourselves in them. We've all felt sadness, we've all felt anger, we've all felt fear, yet we walk around acting like we haven't, or we're better than, or whatever. We don't have time for that. But the moment someone opens up to us, and we share that moment, it is a connection, a resonance of I see you, more than anything else, really. Being able to be vulnerable with someone and to express your emotions and to witness and to share it and not to try to fix. Ooh, that's been mine, right? I would go right to well, let's do this. What can we fix? I don't want to be in this pain and I don't want to see you painful, so how can I help you? Step back, rainbow. Just be with it. Breathe. And allow love to be the healer. When we become more aware of the various expressions of sadness and how they show up in our body, we can learn to surrender and to ride the waves of sadness, knowing that they will eventually pass. We can allow ourselves to feel the feelings that accompany sadness in order to process them all the way through, yet not giving up on the joy of living. You know, sometimes in the most traumatic times, we can also have moments of just rolling over with laughter, right? It's cathartic to feel it all. There's so much we can do to navigate this space of sadness by being courageous and willing to be vulnerable. Dr. Sue Morter, in the book The Energy Codes, wrote, if we can start to think of emotions as energies, as effects to anchor or to expand, we won't be afraid of sadness. It's energies. It's movement. And what is energy? Energy, emotion, it involves movement. Yet when we try to hold it still, we suffer. When we experience grief, we often feel the situation is beyond our control. With grief comes loss and an extreme sense of distress and sorrow. We can feel hopeless, helpless. There are a variety of things that can cause grief, such as death or loss, extreme sadness. And some folks are wired with such sensitivities and empathy towards others that even just being with someone who is suffering can paralyze them. Some situations that cause grief are so gripping that we simply have to cry, to wail, to shake, to scream, to find some sort of relief. And for me, the expressive arts are so powerful in that. Just trying to sit still and be in my head with what has occurred, I literally can't. Like, I will implode. Putting on music and moving how I feel through my body is the only way to feel deeply and give justice to those feelings and find that wave will pass. So let us all be a little bit more gentle and tender with ourselves and with others. There's no right or wrong way to grieve. Everyone's process is different. Being able to allow ourselves to process grief and yet not being absorbed by the grief. That is the nuance, right? That is what takes awareness to know yourself so much, to pay attention to those feelings in your body and what's going on so that you can give voice to the feeling, allow it to move through you in some sort of expression. And just like a wave, it comes and it goes. Yet we don't want to be taken down by the wave and stay in that place of the suffering by telling ourselves the story over and over and over. Being aware to feel the grief, but not being absorbed. It's just like with a strong undertow. We've talked about this before. What they advise when there's an undertow in the ocean or the lake is to flip, float, and follow. To surrender to the wave. Flip, float, and eventually the wave will bring you to shore safely. But if we were trying to resist, we would exhaust ourselves in the process of resisting, and we could get taken over and taken under. Surrender, surrender, breathe. It's the only way, as emotions come and go like waves and tides of the ocean, we go with this flow. And we can remember that we have all survived strong emotions at one time or another. And just like them, this too shall pass. Allow yourself to witness your emotion, but remember you are more than your emotions. Emotions are not permanent. When you start to feel yourself spiraling down, mostly it comes from a thought or a fear of, I don't want this to happen again. When we start to just go in that loop, the invitation is to focus on your breath. Our breath always gives us the opportunity to come back to this now moment. And then to affirm, I am more than my emotions. There's so many paradoxes in this thing called life. Feel the feelings, embrace the feelings, yet don't be overcome. Be present with them, simply be. But remember, you are more than that emotional experience. So this week, I invite you to find a space of love and compassion for yourself and for others. Be gentle and easy when you enter into a space of sadness. Instead of judging yourself or beating yourself up for, oh, why am I feeling this? Or, why am I sad or angry? Whatever those emotions are that we tend to label as bad. What if we were to be gentle with ourselves? Invite in grace. Allow ourselves to experience what we are feeling, even though it may feel ungraceful. Allow glimmers of hope and love to peek through and carry us to the dry land. And find a way to allow what breaks your heart to inspire you to action and create something beautiful, something real, something raw, something human, something that will touch the hearts of others, and remember that we are all in this together. So let's take this into prayer. Taking a deep breath, recognizing the love that is here now, the peace that is here now, the presence of the one life, that which some call God, Spirit, universe. This one universal presence that is moving in, as, and through all things is absolutely here now. This love, this universal presence is absolutely with the families and the loved ones of those who have been affected by great loss. This love and this presence is absolutely with the victims of mass shootings, of hate crimes. And this love is here now as the very essence and nature and truth of our being. So we can lean in to love, knowing that love is the guiding force in all that we do, in all that we are here to be and to become, knowing that it's okay to not be okay. Love is greater than all. And this container, this space of love can hold us in the depths of despair, just as it lifts us into the immense bliss and joy and awe of being. Love is what is real. And love is who we are. So I just allow this love to permeate every cell in my body, to be the guiding force in my life, to know what is mine to do. Who am I to be in each moment? And I invite in grace, that space of grace to hold us in our humanity, that space of grace to remind us that we are all in this together and we are all going through something. So we can allow grace and love to inspire us, to express, to transform pain into a beautiful expression of art that touches the souls of everyone and reminds us at that core level of who we are. That space of grace and love to remind us to be kind. And I call forth a willingness to be aware, to pay attention, to notice what is going on in our physical body, in our emotional body, in our mind, so that we as a holistic being can show up fully integrated and stand as a holy, whole being of light and life. Love is a healer. Love transforms and transcends. So with courage, I invite in the willingness to be vulnerable, to be seen, to love and to be loved, knowing that is what we are here for. Love is always the answer. And with great gratitude for the fulfillment of this word, with great gratitude for the love that is present in this room, for great gratitude for this community that holds each other, that shows up for each other, that creates that space for each other to lean into when needed. With great gratitude, I release this word now into the action of the law that always says, yes, 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 my beloved, you are loved. And so it is.